The relationship between the United States and Germany has been a cornerstone of the liberal international order for decades. From the Marshall Plan to early entry into NATO, to German reunification and the post-Cold War era, the two countries have been engaged together in major historical events while facing many of the same challenges to both security and prosperity. But despite the shared history, the Americans and Germans express very different opinions about the state of relations between their two countries. I'm Kasim, welcome to KJ Vids, and in a brand new series of videos, I will be looking at global attitudes and how people from different countries view each other. Understanding the attitudes of people towards other nations is important, as it can and does play a significant role towards policy making, which could affect wider geopolitical trends. In addition to this, politicians and strategic thinkers of a nation mostly come from the same atmosphere in which these public opinions are held. Such opinions or stereotypes are often carried generation to generation and therefore play a weighty role in shaping international relations. My research is largely based on the findings by the Pew Research Center, which is a non-partisan American fact tank based in Washington. Whilst opinion polls and surveys are always based on relatively small samples compared to the overall population, and do have their limitations such as the way questions are asked or the timings of the polls, Pew Research Center seems to be one of the most comprehensive and most consistent fact tanks compared to others. Feel free to suggest any others and I will check them out. Trump's withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement, his imposition of tariffs on metal imports from Canada, Mexico and the European Union, as well as his withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal, sparked controversy in Europe and particularly upset the Germans, who have had their fair share of Trump's angry tweets. Trump has called Merkel's refugee policy a catastrophic mistake, and Merkel has questioned the US administration's commitment to America's European allies, declaring in 2017 that Germany could no longer completely depend on the US. According to the Pew Research Center, German attitudes towards the US have turned sharply negative in the Trump era, although they have followed a clear pattern over the last 15 years or so. During the course of President George Bush's 2 terms in office, confidence in his leadership and overall ratings of the US declined amongst Germans amid strong opposition to key elements of Bush's foreign policy. President Barack Obama, in contrast, was extremely well regarded in Germany, although his ratings did decline somewhat following the National Security Agency eavesdropping scandal, and his presidency coincided with a rebound in America's overall image. However, the 2017 Global Attitude Survey found that German views towards the US dropped once again since Trump's election. Only 11% of Germans expressed confidence in Trump to do the right thing in world affairs in 2017, down from 86% for Obama in 2016, and just 35% said in 2017 that they had a favourable opinion of the US, compared with 57% the year before. But despite the decline in confidence, many Germans still see the US as a top foreign policy partner, even though Americans don't feel the same way about Germany. When asked which countries are their most important partners in global affairs, Germans named France more than any other country, but the US is in the second spot. More than 4 in 10 Germans say the US is either their country's first or second most important partner. However, Americans are much less likely to see Germany the same way. Only 12% name Germany as one of America's top 2 partners. Germany did, however, make the top 4, trailing Great Britain, China and tying with Israel. In another interesting finding, the Pew Research Center found that whilst Germans believe their relationship with America is patchy, Americans actually think they're good. Almost 7 in 10 Americans, 68%, say relations between the US and Germany are good, while only 22% say they are bad. Meanwhile, a majority of Germans, 56%, say that relations with the US are at least somewhat bad, with only 42% saying they are positive. Americans and Germans also hold different views about what the most important aspect of the US-German relationship is. Roughly a third of Americans say the most important aspects of the relationship are security and defense ties and economic and trade ties. About 1 in 5 named shared democratic values as the preeminent aspect of the relationship. Most Germans, by contrast, say economic connections are the most critical, with about a third saying democratic values are the keystone of the transatlantic relationship. Only 16% of Germans cite defense ties. Successive American presidents have called on NATO allies to spend more on security, and Trump has repeatedly pressed the issue. Pew's 2017 poll shows there are significant differences between Americans and Germans on this topic, as well as significant partisan differences within the US. A plurality of Americans say the country's allies in Europe should spend more on their national defence, while 37% say spending levels should stay about the same, and only 9% think they should be decreased. But there is a wide partisan gap on this issue, with 63% of Republicans calling for more spending from allies, compared with just 33% of Democrats. When Germans were asked about their own defence spending, only 32% of Germans want to see it increased. Roughly half say it should stay where it is, while 13% want it cut. Americans are more likely than their German counterparts to say other countries do too little in global affairs. Roughly 2/3 of Americans say China and Russia do too little to help solve global problems. About half say the same about the United Nations, and 45% of Americans hold this view about the European Union. However, Americans are split on whether Germany is doing too little or the right amount. Germans, on the other hand, have more mixed views. While pluralities in Germany say the UN, Russia and China are doing too little, 46% say the EU is doing enough, and nearly half say that NATO is doing the right amount to help solve the world's problems. Roughly the same share of Americans who say the Atlantic Defense Organization is not doing enough. Germans are divided on whether the US is doing too little or too much to help solve global problems. Increased cooperation with other countries is generally supported in both nations. In a Corbe-Stiftung-sponsored survey fielded in Germany just before the federal elections, people were asked about whether Germany should cooperate more or less with various powers. Majorities said their country should cooperate more with each of these powers, but there were large variations in the strength of the responses. For example, 9 in 10 in Germany said the country should cooperate more with France, but only 56% of Germans wanted to cooperate more with the US, whilst about a third would cooperate less. When the Centre asked the same questions of Americans in October 2017, majorities in the US also said their country should cooperate more with Great Britain, France, Germany and China. But only 43% of people in the US say their country should cooperate more with Russia, while 44% would cooperate less with the Kremlin. This is in stark contrast to opinion in Germany, where 78% want to cooperate more with Moscow. In my research, I came across another interesting observation by the Forsa Institute for Social Research and Statistical Analysis, which is a leading market research and opinion polling company in Germany. They found that a majority of Germans think Europe can defend itself without military support from the United States. Only 37% of respondents said they believed Europe depended on US military help. The Forsa poll also found no significant difference between Eastern and Western German regions, the latter of which have stronger ties to the United States. In the East, 60% thought Europe did not need Washington, and in the West 55%. This poll came less than 2 weeks after Donald Trump said he could withdraw support from NATO if Europe did not share more of what he called an unfair burden on US taxpayers funding the alliance. Early this year at a NATO summit, Donald Trump issued his ultimatum to European allies, urging the continent to spend more on defence if it wants to continue to receive American protection. In a rebuke to the German Chancellor Angela Merkel, the US President also called Germany a captive of Moscow because he said Berlin supported a Baltic Sea gas pipeline from Russia. About 84% of respondents said Trump's comments about Russia controlling Germany were completely absurd, according to the poll which surveyed 1,004 Germans. Even more, 92% said they suspected Mr. Trump's motive for making the comments as primarily to promote the sale of US liquefied gas in Europe and Germany. 2/3 of Germans said they supported the construction of the Nord Stream 2 Baltic Sea pipeline, which is a new export gas pipeline running from Russia to Europe across the Baltic Sea, saying it would help Germany provide a more reliable supply of natural gas. It's important to note that the Obama administration also criticised Nord Stream 2, but the Trump team has been especially vociferous, threatening to tie Germany's moves on the initiative to future trade deals and tariffs involving the United States. The Germans counter that American officials' true motive is to get Berlin to rely more on US energy exports, The timing of Trump's outburst earlier this year was especially alarming to many observers because Trump was going to meet Russian President Vladimir Putin the following Monday, amid concern that he is too close to the autocratic Russian leader. Trump suggested that the Nord Stream 2 project will mean that Germany is paying billions and billions of dollars to Russia, the country we're supposed to be protecting you against, adding that Germany, as far as I'm concerned, is captive to Russia because it's getting so much of its energy from Russia, he said. So we're supposed to protect Germany, but they're getting their energy from Russia. In response to Trump's comments, Democratic leaders Senator Chuck Schumer of New York and Nancy Pelosi of California said in a joint statement that President Trump's brazen insults and denigration of one of America's most steadfast allies, Germany, is an embarrassment. Strategic thinkers today are debating if the post-USSR Western-led international order that has been driven by America and its European allies is on the verge of collapse, and if we are returning to a pre-Atlanticism era where each European nation was only interested in its own affairs with little cooperation on global issues that are important today, such as in technology, climate change and the rest. The differing attitudes in US-German relations and the waning confidence that Germany has in the US is a sign that this is indeed the case. The transatlantic relationship as the axis of so-called world stability is falling apart, and as international institutions are weakened, there will be other powers that fill this vacuum, namely China and Russia in the East. Thanks for watching another KJ vid. If you are from America or Germany, I would love to see if your views correlate towards Pew Research Centre's findings. Please do leave a comment below and I would love to read them. Thanks for watching again and see you next time.